new decision item for career advising. Governor recommendation for $1 million. This would serve 50 out of the 85 schools that are on the wait list for career advising services. Page 390 is a new decision item for literacy coaches. This was also addressed in the governor's amendment. Page,
You put the 5.3 back in?
he didn't put
Or
the
what?
full 5.3, he put 3 million in.
Correct. Are literacy coaches not just teachers?
No, they are not.
They tend to be master teachers that now are coaching other teachers and training other teachers.
Got it.
Page 393 and 395 are both Senate Bill 727 items. This is for the elementary literacy program transfer and the program dollars related
So
to that.
we're not funding those?
No, we did not. The governor did not recommend these two. This would be for the home reading program for kindergarten through 5th grade.
So we passed legislation last year, and we're just not going to fund the associated costs with the legislation that we passed last year?
I think there was a prioritization of sorts on the cost because that was such a high ticket bill.
5 million?
Well, the bill in total, Senate Bill 727 in total.
300 million or whatever it
Or
costs?
the 700.
464 million of new GR in our bill.
So, just for my, the rest of my committee here, I have a little bit of, and I think we've talked about this, I have a little bit of a problem with passing legislation and then not funding it. So, we'll see what the House does with your budget, but I'm going to be funding the requirements of a piece of legislation that we passed last year.
Certainly
So,
appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I think the next page then is on 410. This is for the Missouri Healthy Schools. This is $65,000 in additional federal funding for that program due to an increase in the grant. Page 423 is the new decision item for the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant. We have one of these grants right now. We're in year 5 of that grant. We also got a new grant for another 5 years for $49 million. Year 1 of the new grant and year 5 of the old grant overlap. So this is additional authority for us to expend that, the portion of the $11 million for year 2 that we don't have core funding for. Page 427 is a core change for the reading literacy program. That was a cut recommended by the governor of $2.5 million, zeroing that program out. Page 423 is another recommendation for a reduction of $525,000, which would zero out the Character Ed Initiative program.
That was 432.
Sorry,
Just to make sure.
432, yes. Page 442 is the new decision item for the Adult Education and Literacy Program, additional federal funding of $1.5 million to address their wait list and the 2,300 residents that are on that wait list. Page 445 is the core for the Workforce Diploma Program, core reduction there of $2 million recommended by the governor, leaving a core of $2 million in this appropriation. Yes.
That's what it was the year prior, I
Yes.
believe.
Page 450 is the core for the feminine hygiene products. The governor's reduced this one by $350,000 to a core of $650,000, which reflects more the need that we have seen in request from LEAs in the past years. And then page 455 is the new decision item for the Star Academy, a turnkey intervention program for middle school students. It's a hands-on STEM curriculum. Governor recommendation, $1 million. That brings us to Book 4. The first core change in Book 4 is on page 457. This has been core reduced to 0 as we've expended the funds in this, all of the money in this fund. This was part of Senate Bill 681 back in 2022. Okay. first new decision item in this book is on page 489. This is the performance-based assessment. This is a recommendation of $3 million to address the MAP-A alternative assessments for students with disabilities. Page 497 is the new decision item for the Innovative Assessment Demonstration Authority federal request for $500,000. This demonstration, if we are successful, would allow us to submit a waiver to the feds to waive some of their current assessments.
So what is it you're doing right there again?
So this is a demonstration grant that would allow for the trying of other types of assessments and the measuring of the success of those assessments. And then if we have successful results, we can use those results to then request a waiver from the feds to waive some of the assessments they currently require us to do.
So is that part of that group that some of the schools are already joining into?
It's related in that the ultimate goal is to be able to have through course assessments during the course of the year rather than waiting to the end of the year and just doing one big assessment.
So
at
you're,
the end.
yeah, okay. I fully support that. You're looking at trying to measure growth instead of some tests at the end is basically what you're trying to get at, I think, isn't it?
That's the idea. So
Okay.
this is a federal grant to kind of prove the concept and hopefully expand that over time.
Page 506 is the new decision item for collaborative initiative, competency-based education. This is $3 million. It actually relates to the tab before that, the Success Ready Student Network, which was one-time funding only of $3 million. So this would be replacement funding and ongoing efforts in that area. No, it was not recommended by the governor.
Can I ask another question? So is this the money to expand that? Is that to expand that that initiative? Is that what you're saying?
it's
To
to
let more
support-
schools get in?
It's to support more ongoing work in that regard. And on page 507, it kind of outlines how that would be divided up and done or utilized for this funding, if received.
Okay, thank you.
So tell me what happens. It's obviously not recommended by the governor, so tell me what happens.
I think the Success Ready Student Network would continue their work, and we would try to support them in that work. Some of the item before this would be somewhat related to that. It'll be tougher to get the ball moving quicker if we don't have this funding.
Wouldn't it mean that you're probably not going to be able to expand to some of those other schools that are asking to get in? Is that part of what would happen?
It would be up to the network to decide how they want to handle that because they are in some ways partially self-funded in terms of the work that they're doing. So we just wouldn't have the resources to support them at the same level we have had this past year.
But most likely, probably not all the ones, because I think more and more are wanting in. Is that correct?
That's correct, and it would slow progress.
Okay. Page 531 is a new decision item for Title II federal funding increase of $6 million recommended by the governor. Page 539, new decision item for Title III federal funding, $263,000 recommended by the governor. Page 570, new decision item for the Spec Ed grant, IDEA, a request of $26.7 million in federal funding. Page 557 is a new decision item for the High Need Fund, recommended by the governor for $14.7 million. And that is the last new decision item or core change in Book 4. Book 5 is the Office of Childhood. The first new decision item there is on page 633, Early Childhood Special Education, a request for $20.7 million general revenue recommended by the governor. This is to address a shortfall of funding in fiscal year '24. Nothing like
walking in and asking a question. I'm sorry. Obviously, a lot of us have lots of committees this morning. Office of Childhood, obviously, we've had some changes in the department. We've had a lot of issues with child care subsidy. So what a perfect time to jump in and ask that question. Where are we today with payments to our providers? Is there still a backlog?
You can do it right here.
Good morning. Can you hear me? I am Kelly Jones, Deputy Commissioner for Learning Services for DESE. So, been on the job for 4 months. So I am gathering all this information. But to kind of to talk about your point, Senator, it is very difficult to really explain all of it. But I'm going to try to break it down into language that I think is the easiest way for me to understand, which I think in reality will be the easiest way for you to understand. A lot of talk has been about the backlog. And that backlog really is from January to December of 2024. That is when the IT system was not working. Mm-hmm. That is when things turned into a hot mess. So what happens is if a provider needs or thinks there's something incorrect, they somewhat, I would call it, almost create a ticket, which we call a PRR, which is a payment resolution request. And in those PRRs, it could be anything from the child was not identified correctly, the attendance wasn't correct, we owe them, they owe us. There's just a lot of things that could happen. So we took our DESE team and we contracted out 2 different types of contracts to review all of those PRRs. So what I can report today that all of the PRRs, which were about 32,000 plus, because people were just immediately putting these tickets in, there were about 32,000 plus, and from January to September, all of those PRRs have been reviewed. So what that means, a lot of them have been closed out, a lot of providers have been paid. There are still providers that we have identified that we still know we owe, but that has been, at least they're reconciled and closed, so we can start paying them. So in the coming weeks, those providers that we still owe money to will be paid. October to December.
Can I cut you off there?
Yes,
So
you sure
in
can.
the coming weeks, they will be paid.
Well, what happens is, once they're reconciled, and then we've identified from all those months that we owe them money, then they have an invoice has to be created, has to go through the financial piece, and then the money's sent out. So sometimes it could take up to a couple of weeks once that reconciliation is closed out and we owe them money.
Okay.
And then October to December, our system was working. The calculator was fixed, the process, a lot of the IT stuff was taken care of. So there are a lot fewer PRRs or tickets, if you will, from October to December. So we are still moving on those, but feel pretty confident that most of those are correct and we don't owe a whole lot of providers in that bunch. And then from this point on, in 2025, things are looking like the IT system is working
Okay,
appropriately.
who's the contract with for that?
Well, there's a lot of different, WWT
Or
and...
who screwed up the whole online system where everything failed? I mean, this went online, but this wasn't a DESE system, or wasn't created within ITSD, was it? Wasn't it a separate contract?
That is correct.
Okay, and who's that contract with?
That was with WWT and MTX.
Okay.
Those were the software.
And we're still,
And Kinder System is a piece of that too, because that is the attendance piece that is fit into with those
okay,
two.
and we're still contracting with them.
We are. Phase 1 is complete. It'll be complete at the end of the month, and that's closing things out and fixing this calculator and things like that. Then we have a phase 2, which is when we start moving things to enrollment. And that is the piece that we are entering in right now, because the governor and the federal government has charged us to now, instead of calculating with attendance, we have to calculate per enrollment. So phase 2 of this contract, we do plan to move forward because that system is pretty complicated. We'd have to go rebid everything out, take another 9 to 12 months to do that. So we do plan to move forward with WWT and MTX for phase 2.
Okay.
And that is what that piece of it is.
And obviously very supportive of the movement from
Thank you.
attendance to enrollment. That's absolutely
good.
imperative
Thank
to
you.
keep these centers afloat.
Right.
Obviously, that's how you pay stuff, right? You have to pay your bill, you have to pay your teachers, whether somebody's in the classroom or not. So very supportive of that. However, the last thing I want us to do is go live with that system and not have it be ready and then be back in the same place we were. I mean, I remember Senator Black. I don't know if he meant to. Seeing a reply all, nothing like a reply all email to the entire General Assembly. I don't know, somehow I received that email. But seriously, it's one of those things where you talk about something that impacts every single district across the state, and where all of us are beyond frustrated with the lack of, I don't even know what to say, just the bureaucracy nightmare that created. So, I don't know. Is it
You are
ready to
correct.
go live before you?
Well, you are correct, and obviously we are paying close attention to that. When the governor and the state of the state, he charged us with that, and he said the next fiscal year, which a lot of us in our minds thought July, and we were in a little bit of a panic because that was probably not going to be appropriate, and we would probably be doing it as quickly as we've been doing it. So I believe that we have been able to kind of refocus on that. Our game plan is right now we are writing the companies, or I am not writing because I am not an IT person, but we are writing the scripts to go into phase 2. And what they will do, I mean, we've all learned from this, they will go parallel with that attendance piece. And our plan would be, once that is run and tested, we cannot do what happened the first round. Go parallel with that and hopefully go live in approximately October with pay on enrollment. Firm believer in communication. I think we probably could have done a lot better job in that, in communicating with our providers, even when we were on fire. We are going to start the communication now, talking about enrollment, because that will be something else on their end that they will have to know how to do. It'll be a little bit changed for them again. So we have got to start talking about that. We've got to start training people on how that piece looks. So we are ready to go live in October. So a lot of lessons learned. So I would like to sit here and with full confidence and say that I firmly believe we will be ready to go in October.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Just one question,
Okay.
Kelly, before you leave. When we change over to this, it sounds like new system. Does that mean new iPads, completely new system? All right,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah.
People have been using X for attendance,
That's right.
are not going to be asked to throw that in the trash and learn a new system. It's going to be a change within the system used today.
Correct, but there will be a little shift because that iPad is obviously attendance, so that will no longer be really, wow, the calculation is figured. But so I think
But
there'll
they're
be
still going to be able to use it because there's other reasons why
right.
the providers want the attendance, right? When it comes to, I'm going to say security, that may not be the correct word. All of it's still going to be done through that same system.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Page 657 is the first major core change in Book 5, and that is to the Imagination Library. The core had been $11.1 million. Governor's recommending $6 million there to more closely reflect the number of children that have enrolled in this program and are anticipated to enroll in this program. So to more closely match anticipated need. Page 667 is the new decision item for the Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems. This is a federal request for $639,000 to fully expend the remainder of this grant. Page 680 is the new decision item for First Steps. Request and recommendation by the governor there for $17.9 million. Page 705 is the new decision item for the Child Care Quality Initiatives, $1.6 million of federal funding requested. Page 713, new decision item recommended by the governor for $10 million for child care innovation grants to support new centers, partnering with businesses and community partners, recommended $10 million in federal funding there. Page 715 is a new decision item for the Teach Scholarships recommended by the governor for $700,000 to continue the scholarships for those applicants that are receiving them right now. Page 723, child care subsidy discretionary. There's a core reduction there to zero that grant out because that grant has ended. And And same with page 734, the child care discretionary grant ending there. Page 742 is the new decision item for general revenue, or excuse me, for CCDF funding to replace.
Back up to 740.
740? I'm sorry, I said 742 and talking 740, sorry. So on page 740 is the new decision item for the child care subsidy replacement funding. We had $54.7 million in ARP child care discretionary in there last year. This replaces it with CCDF funding. Page 770, excuse me, I can't use numbers this morning. 742 and 745 are both to address the new regulations that Commissioner Kelly Jones was talking about with the federal government that requires us to pay based on authorized enrollment and to pay prospectively instead of paying retrospectively like we do today. So the new decision items there, the collective amount of those two new decision items will also address paying on the 2024 market rate survey. Page 748 is removing the ARP child care discretionary appropriate authority that was in that section. And that's all the major changes or new decision items in Book 5. That takes us then to Book 6. The first new decision item there is for the charter school capital improvement revolving fund. This was over in the state treasurer's office for $2 million. The governor has recommended transferring it here and adding $5 million more to that to address the capital improvements needed on the charter schools. So this first one is the transfer authority, and then on page 774 is the authority for the program dollars. Next, we have page 811, which is the Missouri Assistive Technology Revolving Fund, a request for $200,000 in additional authority out of that revolving fund to work with the Department of Health and Senior Services on a project to put assistive technology in the homes of individuals that have dementia or Alzheimer's and allow them to stay in their homes longer. That brings us to the transfers. And we do have some core changes in those transfers. Do you want me to go through those too? Okay, page 817 is the core change there for the county foreign insurance that we talked about, the new decision item earlier that funds the foundation formula. On page 834, there you have the lottery proceeds classroom trust fund transfer. And you can see on page 837, the core reduction that we talked about under the foundation formula in Book 1. And that is the extent of the major core items.
Senator.
Thanks for indulging me. I know you love when I ask questions. I'm
I have
going to
no problem with
blame
your questions.
Senator Searpoy for his bill this morning to excuse my tardiness. I'm sure
Good bill.
the chairman probably asked plenty of questions in the beginning of the hearing, but
I did.
wanna
You
make-
weren't here, but that's okay.
If we could go back real quickly, first of all, foundation formula, the SAT, and I'm sorry, I don't have the number in front of me, was increased to 7,000.
The calculated amount for next year is 7,145.
7,145. So that's the first increase in several years.
This current year, it went from 6375 to 6760. When we do the recalculation,
Okay.
we spread it over 2 years. So this year had a partial
It was
increase.
half and then half. Okay.
Right.
And so the governor's request is an underfunding of the foundation formula to the tune of about 300.
That's correct.
Okay. And then another question about our MSSD schools. This is something I always have concerns about, that we're not doing nearly enough for, honestly, for our most vulnerable students. And I feel like they've always been treated kind of as the stepchild, and a lot of folks, even legislators, don't even know they're in their backyard. How many MSSD programs do we have across the state right now?
So there are 34
34.
schools for the severely disabled, and then blind and deaf, each have
Okay, so
one.
34 plus the school for the blind and school for the deaf?
Correct.
Okay. So the only NDIIC for MSSD is the transportation?
No.
Is there another one in here?
There's
Oh,
a
the
$3
Medicaid
million
spending authority.
spending, yeah, Medicaid spending. So we draw a Medicaid match if the students receive like PT, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and are Medicaid eligible. And then also for some of the transportation costs for those Medicaid eligible children as well.
Okay. Would you follow up with the committee just on teacher salaries, staff salaries? I know obviously these schools require RNs, nurse assistants, all of those things. My understanding is we're still struggling with vacancies in a lot of these schools because of simply really hard jobs with not a lot of people to help them out. So I'm really concerned about this, and I feel like the department hasn't done nearly enough to elevate the needs. And I'm certainly hearing it from an RN that works in our MSSD school in my district, as well for parents who have kids who are severely disabled, and they look around and see what's happening in the district school across the street, and they feel like they're neglected, quite frankly. So continue to want to elevate that and really look at what we can do. You know, we're one of only 2 states that operate schools for the severely disabled, I believe. Is that correct? And I think we really need to take some steps forward to see what we can do to better serve these students. Thank you.
I just want to make sure I understand something right. This underfunding of the foundation formula, that was, if I understand, it was caused by, I guess, MSEP 6 testing made us move some of the districts that were in the pot to establish the state adequacy target, move them out and moved other districts in that did well. And that's what made the giant jump on the
That's
state adequacy target.
Yeah, certainly a contributing factor. And under the MSIP 5 criteria, we would have 300 or more districts that would score 90% or above and could be eligible for the
Including in the
performance
basket.
group.
Okay.
The administrative rule the statute limits us to the top 25% in that group. So we would always have about 125 districts that would be in that group. When we went to MSIP 6, the standards were elevated. The scoring is much more difficult. We may only have 35 or 40 districts that would score 90% or above. And when you get that more selective group of districts, their profile looks differently.
More
They tend to have a little
expensive
more
districts, right.
expenditures and serve a little different population of students, which
Okay. Well, this year or next year, as MSEP 6 maybe is more accepted and does better, will that basket be mixed again so that number could go down, or do you stay with what you got?
So every 2 years, we have to look, and part of that recalculation, so we get to the end of this coming fiscal year, next summer, we'll start that process. We'll look at all the districts that meet the criteria. I don't necessarily expect the list to change significantly at this point because we're still within the same criteria.
So is the list, the potential school districts that can be included in this basket, is that just, I mean, when it's time to get this number, do you throw the dice and change it up, or is it, once you have it nailed down, as long as they qualify, they stay in there?
It would be based on their we would look at 2
Right.
years worth of scores, and if they have both years above 90, they would stay in the hopper. If they
So
don't, they come out.
Okay, so the expensive schools that were put in there now will stay there as long as they qualify.
As long as they stay above 90%, correct?
Maybe we should throw the dice and change that pot every 2 years for anybody that qualifies, because some of the districts that may qualify next year may be less expensive.
It's a possibility. It happens, there's some movement every year, and it's,
But it's always leaving, because if you're in as long as you stay in, as long as you stay qualified.
Well, if the 2 years that we're going to look at are 2 years that we're not in the same bucket as the last
Right.
time. So we could have a whole nother group of
Could, but if
districts
you're in,
coming
you're in. If you still qualify, you still qualify. So
Yes,
that's
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good. So can you explain why we went from MSIP 5 to 6? Like what? Like
So since the inception of MSIP, and it goes back to the 90s, there's been multiple generations of that, and each generation tries to be a little more reflective of what we think we need to evaluate when it comes to schools. One of the biggest difference between 6 and 5 is within MSIP 5, you could either do well by growing students or do well by having high scores. And as long as you did well in one or the other, you had a really high score because you could do it. It was an either-or combination. With MSIP 6, we've separated those out to where we have growth scores for every district, and we have performance just levels scores for every district. So it is much more difficult to score, and it does a better job of disaggregating the districts, if you will. So we don't have 60 or 70% of our districts above 90%. So it kind of spreads it out to where it's a little more representative, we think. And I think it challenges districts at a different level to try to make those improvements that they need to do. So it's more rigorous.
Question dealing with that. If something happens with the U.S. Department of Education that takes some of these strings off of you that you have currently, is there a chance that some of this all changes and we look at more of a strict growth model by students and some different things like you're doing with some of your test groups, that some of this could change dramatically in the near future if that happens?
I think it's certainly possible there'd be changes. Some of these requirements come through administrative rulemaking, but many of them are also part of the statutes, so there'd be statutory changes at the federal level that would have to be required to change some of these things. So I think it's at this point, we're kind of a little bit in a wait and see to see what develops moving forward.
Well, what I'm talking about is, say they do it as a block grant, and they start coming down as block grants with fewer strings attached, and it would give you guys the ability to do some of that. I guess I'm asking, is that something you are at least having the conversations about?
Well, we're certainly open to that. There's no
Okay.
doubt.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? All right. I think we're done, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank
Good.
you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank
Yep.
you very much.
The only other agenda item I've got is the auditor.
Thank you.
What's that?
Good morning. Well, I did. I had a lot to lose. I got up to, my peak was 243. It's pretty high.
Mr. Auditor, yeah, whenever you're ready.
All right. Scott Fitzpatrick, State Auditor. Thank you for the opportunity to present our budget request. Also want to thank you guys for the
If Desi could go ahead and, yeah, that'd be great. We actually still have a hearing going on if you guys want to leave. Thanks, ma'am.
So thanks
Yeah, whenever you're
for
ready,
hearing the
Scott.
budget and the budget request, and also want to thank you all for the support from, well, 2 years ago and then again last year after it got vetoed to provide our office the funding we needed to staff it back up. As I've said the last couple of years, when I took over, we were at about 89 people in the office when we were supposed to have about 163. And so we were very understaffed, and we're struggling to just perform the basic functions we had to do that statute requires us to do on an annual basis. So the funding you provided us has helped us staff up. We have a ways to go still to get where we need to be, but we have gotten up to about 120 people, which is a significant increase. And with the wide-ranging audit requests that we get from local governments, and there's a lot happening with COVID funding and money that local governments receive during from the federal government. And as many of you know, there's a lot happening in the St. Louis area that has required our attention just due to requests from the city. There have been several petition on it. So we have a lot going on in the office, and the funding has helped us be able to address that. Our book is very short. We have 2 decision items. One is on page 2. It's the governor's pay plan. So that's just what, that was not a department request. That was just the governor's recommendation. And we know you guys will make a decision on the pay plan one way or the other. We just ask that whatever that decision is, we would appreciate receiving whatever treatment all other state agencies receive in that, and appreciate any consideration there. Page 6 is our core decision item. I kind of just talked about our staffing situation, and we primarily, the main thing we do is audit. We have a few other functions, such as writing the fiscal notes for ballot initiatives, certifying property tax rates for local governments to make sure they're compliant with the Hancock Amendment, and certifying the general obligation bond issuances for local governments as well, to ensure that those are saving money when they do those. But those are our primary functions, and as I said, the vast majority of our time, effort, and the money you guys provide us goes to paying auditors' salaries and the travel expenses associated with going around the state to the various places that need to be audited. So that's the request on page 6, $13.489 million. If there are any questions, I'll answer them. If not,
Any questions from the committee for the auditor? Doesn't look like it. Scott, thanks for coming in this morning.
thank you.
All right, that will conclude the hearing this morning. Thanks for coming, guys.